Okay, here we go. Behaferim. Almost finishing up. We don't have so much time today, so a little bit here and then maybe next time. We're looking at this whole idea of the seventh day of Pesach and how the splitting of the sea. We have the original occurrence, the yearly occurrence, as in the yearly commemoration of it, and then future redemption. Like the sister Maamar, it's all about how are we comparing what was the original splitting of the sea. We're like, oh, all these miracles and this redemption that occurred is going to be just like the future redemption when Mashiach comes. And that seems to not align. Aside from the fact that there was going to be the 7 pathways and you have the 12 pathways. 12 was the original sea split, the 12 pathways. And it says here the river's going to split to 7. We also have great miracles that are going to occur in the future redemption that did not occur at the splitting of the sea. So not only do they seem to not be similar, it seems to not make sense to say not only are we comparing it to the original redemption, but it's a compliment to compare it to the original redemption. Like, oh, look at how great it is because we've compared it to the original. That seems to not make sense. And that's most of our questions are based around that. We did go through the thing about how the splitting of the sea, it's not just a thing for then, it's a thing that we are supposed to remember daily in our prayers. We have to have a proper commemoration of it yearly. And when we have the proper commemoration of it, it's like it happens again, at least in the spiritual realms, it reoccurs. Then we got into this whole thing about what is the spiritual thing going on with the splitting of the sea. The splitting of the sea is the idea of revealing what was once concealed. The depths of the sea are concealed. We cannot see them. We can't even fathom them. I think they have guesstimates, or maybe they don't have guesstimates of how deep the sea goes, but I don't know how we could ever really know because we can't actually get that deep. But we can't even get to the bottom of the sea. And all of a sudden we're out the sea and the whole thing is splitting. The point is we're revealing what's concealed. And the parallel for that is we're about to go to Har Sinai. We're going to Mount Sinai to get the Torah. And that's when the concealed is going to become revealed. Because when God originally created the world, there was a separation. Heavens, as in spirituality, stays in heaven. Earth, physicality, stays on earth. There's a divide. Now, when we're going to get the giving of the Torah, there's going to be a fusion of the two. As in the whole idea of bringing heaven down to earth. We can bring the spiritual into the physical. And we can actually transform the physical to spiritual. So for all that to occur, we need to have a preparation for it. So even though the sea was not specifically on the way to Mount Sinai, and they could have gotten there without going through the sea, they went through the sea, not just to punish the Egyptians, but because it's part of the preparation. It's part of the whole process of getting ready to go. The original preparation we have is what we call the Kor Barzel, the iron crucible that we went through, which was the exile. This is now preparing us for great revelations of Mount Sinai, and this makes the world an appropriate vessel for the light that it's going to receive. The whole idea about you have to have the light and the vessel have to match for it to hold each other, etc., etc., etc. Then we got to the whole thing comparing sea life to terrestrial. So everything in the sea, it lives within its source. It recognizes where its life comes from. It comes from the sea. It knows the sea sustains it. Terrestrial life on dry land, even though we come from the earth, we cannot live within the earth or else we wouldn't survive. That's the idea of independent entities or seemingly independent entities that don't necessarily recognize where our life source comes from versus the sea. And we have this whole idea of revealed worlds, concealed worlds, etc. But the bottom line is, when the sea split, there was also kind of this merging of these two worlds. Where all of a sudden now, the seabed, even though it's now dry land, but it's still bringing about these revelations and the recognition of what it means to know your source kind of idea, to be in this kind of spiritual reality. And then we got to the whole thing about how deep do these levels occur, how far reaching was the split, because we say that all the waters split. So we say from what we call in Hebrew the Yam HaKadmoni, which we said that the primordial sea, all the way down, all the way to the Yam Suf, to the End Sea. So it's like primordial sea all the way down to End Sea. Throughout all the realms, through all the spiritual realms, etc., the splitting, the revelation occurred all the way through. We got to this whole idea about, as we said, that it's all preparation for the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. We know that when God gave us the Torah, it now became our Torah down here on earth. And we know that because when the angels come to God say, when's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? God says we have to go to the court on earth to find out when they can say Rosh Chodesh is. There's parameters to say when's the new moon. So at the end of the day, they're the ones who decide it. God does not decree a new moon upon us. There's a procedure for saying you have to have witnesses, etc., etc. Then we say, how do we do this whole revealed, concealed thing on a day-to-day basis? We're supposed to do it within prayer. Prayer is service of the heart, and it's supposed to be using all of our soul faculties. We want to maximize that as much as possible, and then we want to go a step above that, which is V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol vavcha, with all your heart, b'chol nafscha, with all your soul, v'chol me'odecha, with all your might. So with all your might, with your will and your desire, which is beyond the regular soul powers, and we know that because it could take over your whole body. Will and delight, it goes above reason and intellect. It's already the highest of man. We want to try to raise our love of God to these higher realms, to what was once concealed within us. We got to dig within us to bring out this great level of love, the power that we have, the strength that we have to bring this about, etc. This is also where we saw kind of the parallel of I want nothing but you. That's the level of what we're speaking about, where I want only you. I don't need your Gan Eden. I don't need your reward. I don't need your world to come. I just want you. Then we got to this whole idea about what occurred at the plague of the firstborn, and it said God himself came down, and it was speaking about how we have the soul power levels, but we have that existing, these are attributes that exist within worlds, these are attributes that quote unquote exist within God. So we say like, I'm going to be like God. Man is made in God's image, so that we share these attributes. God has given us these attributes so we can relate to him in them. And what occurred is that you have this level called malchus, of kingship. All the other levels get channeled through kingship. When God himself comes, there was this level of great revelation that occurred, but it was still a channeling because it had to come through this level of kingship. But at the sea, it went beyond all of that. It went beyond anything else to the point where it says that even a maidservant was able to experience a revelation that prophets didn't see. What did that look like? And we're talking about, what's being revealed, the concealed is becoming revealed. What it looked like, that they could actually point with their finger, this is my God. You could actually point and point to like something tangible. That's how real God or godliness was in that moment of the splitting of the sea. That's how thorough the revelations were, to the point that you could actually point and say, this is God. Well, this is my God. That's what occurred. Now it just goes into more, where it starts looking more about the verse of Zeh Keli Vanvehu. This is my God, and I will beautify him. Zeh means this. Keli means my God. Vanvehu, and I will beautify him. There's different translations for this word. So you have Onkelos. He was a Roman convert. He translated the Torah into Aramaic. Rashi is considered the foremost commentator of the Torah. Onkelos is like another one, because even though he's translating to Aramaic, it's a commentary because this is how we know what these words mean. It's not conversational Hebrew that's being used. So what is this word? What does this mean? So we see according to a word he chose, we're like, this is what it means. So, Zeh Keli Vanvehu, Onkelos renders it as an expression of habitation, as in the following phrases: a tranquil dwelling, a sheepfold. So here we have all the different ways. Like, see the root of this word? It's the same, here's translated as I will beautify him, but like, look, it's the same root word as habitation, as in I'm going to build a home for him. Another explanation, Vanvehu is an expression of beauty. Well, you see how I beautify him? Thus the phrase means I will tell of his beauty and his praise to those who enter the world. This is what he's saying, that either we could say, Zeh Keli Vanvehu, this is my God and I'll beautify him, as in, my God who is so beautiful, I'm going to tell everybody about him, or it's an expression of building a home, a dwelling. Zeh Keli Vanvehu would be, this is my God and I will build a home for him. Here we have much text. See, here the translation is that I will extol him. So here they're using the translation of praise. This is my God. So here the translation is that, and I will extol him. Rabbi Eliezer says, from where is it derived that a maidservant beheld at the Red Sea what was not beheld by Yecheskel and the other prophets? Yecheskel is Ezekiel, of whom it is written, and to the prophets I appeared in various guises. It was Rashi said that a maidservant saw what even prophets didn't see. That's the level of revelation that occurred. So he's saying, where do we see that from? And to the prophets, I say, I appeared in various guises, and the heavens opened, and I saw visions of God. We all know the chariot of Ezekiel, and you're saying a maidservant saw even beyond that. So an analogy. We have a parable now. A king of flesh and blood comes to a province, a circle of guards around him, warriors at his right and at his left, armies before him and behind him, and all are asking, who's the king? There's a whole entourage coming, but who's the king? For he is flesh and blood as they are. Because the king's a person, it could be anybody here. I see lots of people. Which person is the king? But when the Holy One was revealed at the sea, there was no need for anyone to ask who's the king. When God revealed himself at the sea, no one's like, hey, which one's the king? We all knew like, this is God. When it's people, you can be like, hey, who's the one in charge, right? Who's the boss? Because there's nothing to make them look different. All of a sudden, God reveals himself. No one's like, who's God? Which one is he? For when they saw him, they knew him, and they all opened their mouths and said, this is my God, and I'll extol him. So Zeh Keli Vanvehu. Here it's using the word Vanvehu, like literally I will host him. That's like the abode thing. Extol him is like beauty, and I'll sing his praise to people. Rabbi Shmuel says, is it possible to host one's master? As in, can I make a home for God? Rather read Vanvehu as I shall beautify myself from the rear neck, before him with mitzvot. So he says, no, it's beauty, before him with mitzvot, so the beautiful lulav, beautiful tzitzis, a beautiful shofar, beautiful prayer. All the rabbis are picking on this word now to give different explanations of it. So one saying, we could say, this is my God and I will praise him, because they were able to say, this is God. Tangible pointing the finger to say this is God. Another one says it's not an expression of praise and beauty. It's beauty in the sense of I'm going to make him beautiful with all the mitzvahs that I do. So I'm going to do all these great, wonderful mitzvahs, but I'm going to do them in a beautiful way. I'm not just going to have a shofar. I'm going to have a beautiful shofar. I'm not just going to have a candlestick. I'm going to have a beautiful candlestick. My prayer is not just going to be words. It's going to be beautiful. Abba Shal, so we have another sage says, I'll liken myself to him. New twist explanation. You say Zeh Keli Vanvehu means Vanvehu ani v'hu, I and he. Who is he and he is she? Ani v'hu, I and he. So he's saying you could take this word and say, I will liken myself to him. Just as he is merciful and gracious, you too be merciful and gracious. We have the explanation of beautify him with praise, beautify him with the mitzvos, build a home for him, but also to say, I'm going to be like him. How we like God when we imitate his attributes. So we know God is merciful, kind, and patient, etc. So when we are like this as well. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, beautify and praise the Holy One, blessed be he, for all the peoples of the world. Rabbi Yossi ben Damascus says, I shall make a temple before him, Neve being the temple. So here we said, we have, again, like the abode, I'm going to make him a home. Taking this word, and it's like, what does it mean? What was exceptional about this? So we see all these different ways that the word can be seen. At the sea, each person raised his finger and said, this is my God, and I will beautify him. Hashem said to the Jewish people, in this world, you said before me, this is my God, only once. But in the time to come, you will say this, as in Zeh, twice. How do we have that? Behold, this is our God, this is the God we have hoped for. Now we're starting to look at the future now. Because as originally, you said Zeh, Kelev, An Behu, Zeh, this, as in like, this is God. You said it once. But in the future, we have, V'amar Bayom Behu, they're going to say on that day, Hine Elokeinu Zeh, Zeh once. Who's keeping track at home? Hine Elokeinu Zeh Kivinu Lo, we have awaited him, we have hope for him. Yoshenu Zeh L'Vemer, this is the God we have hope for. So now we have Zeh twice, which means a double revelation. So on the sea, you had one level of revelation, that all the way through. But just you wait for the time to come. It's going to be double even what we had. A revelation that was experienced by all, even a maidservant, and a revelation experienced in a tangible way that we could actually point to it. We see the original thing, and we see the future of this one also. And we see what it looks like when we're talking about the revelation, the levels of the revelation, that even the maidservant could see it, and even that it was a tangible point to say, this is my God. Now, we'll wrap up today with the whole thing about the seventh day. This is the seventh day of Pesach. The splitting of the sea occurred on the seventh day of Pesach. That's why that night men will stay up and stuff, because now's not the time to sleep. We're crossing the sea. It's a custom that people have. Versification. It was reported to Pharaoh that the people had fled. There's an explanation where it talks about it. It says that the people had fled. It talks about how the Jewish people had to run away because they were so sunk in the depravity of Egypt, which was such an evil place. Remember, we've described it, that it was like the worst of places. They had been there for so long, and they were so sunk within the Egyptian culture kind of idea. So the only way to get out was to run. They had to have this idea of like rushing out, which we know they did. They rushed out. So we say, commentary, reported to Pharaoh. Pharaoh sent officers with them. He sent officers with the Jewish people. So even after everything, he still thought that like, oh, you guys will go for a day or two and then you'll come back. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. Pharaoh sent officers with them. And as soon as the 3 days the Jewish people had set to go into the desert and return had passed, and the officers saw that they were not returning to Egypt, they came and informed Pharaoh on the 4th day. This is showing us how we get to the seventh. How do we know the splitting of the sea was on the 7th day? So originally when Moshe said, let us go to serve God in the desert, he originally said we're going to go for 3 days. Change plan. So that's why Pharaoh's basically like, you'll take, the young, you'll take the old, you take whoever, go without the cattle, go with the cattle. Like, there's all these bargainings because it's like, I'm not just letting you guys go, you won't come back. So here we see he sent people with them. Here, go, make sure. So that means it's 3 days. They see like, wait a minute, they're not turning around. The officers turn around to tell Pharaoh on the 4th day, like, they don't have plans to come back. So on the 5th and the 6th days after the Jewish people's departure, that's when they pursue them. Pharaoh's like, that's it, get the army, we're going. So that takes until day 5 and 6 because you have to travel now this amount of time. On the night preceding the 7th, they went down into the sea. Again, that's why people stay up then. In the morning of the 7th day, the Jewish people recited the Song of the Sea. Therefore, we read in the Torah the song on the 7th day. That is the 7th day of Pesach. This just gave us commentary to show it was reported to Pharaoh. Why does it say like Pharaoh was told about this? It seems like an interesting thing. Instead of Pharaoh saw that people weren't coming back. Where were they? But it says it was reported to him because like, no, there were officers who went. And when you do the whole day count, we see that the crossing occurred the 7th at night. So by the 7th day in the morning, they saw everybody's drowned. Like, yay, we're all free. Here is something very particular about 7th. Remember I was telling you about that first maamer that the Rebbe said when he became Rebbe, and it was this maamer called Basi Lagani. I've come into my garden. There's a whole thing about our generation. We're the 7th generation. If you count from the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, and you count down to the generation we're in, that's 7. So there's a thing about 7s. There's something about the number 7. We already know 8 is one above nature, but 7's got its own thing going for it. So this is what this is, and this is what we'll wrap up with. We have this verse of Kol HaShuvin Chavivin. All the 7th are beloved. The maamer doesn't quote this whole thing, but I took the whole thing so you could see how we got to that. So above, as in up above, the 7th is beloved. You have skies of the skies, firmament, heaven, celestial realm, abode, and clouds. It goes through like 7 layers of aboveness. It's written, extol him who rides the clouds, Lord his name, etc. In the land, not just in the sky, as in not just in heaven is 7 beloved, but also down here below. How do we see that? You have earth, ground, globe, valley, wilderness, oblivion, and world. Wonderful. That's different layers. So we see there's 7 layers. It's also written, he judges the world with righteousness, judges the people with equity. Okay. In the generations, the 7th is beloved. Adam, Shes, Enosh, Canaan, Malalel, Yered, and Chanoch. And it's written, and Chanoch walked with God. Enoch. I think that's the English of it. Like, why is that easier? I don't know. But it says about him that he walked with God. Count from Adam and you go all the way down. It's like he specifically walked with God. So we see there's something about the number 7. Forefathers, the 7th is beloved. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Levi, Kas, Amar, Moshe. So Moshe is number 7 from Abraham. That whole thing with Basi Lagani, from Adam, the sin of the tree, you've got 7 generations that it says that they expelled the divine presence. Here it's talking about it in a positive way. That Chanoch, the 7th from Adam, walked with God, and like it's showing in a positive way. But there's also the flip side of it, from the sin of the tree, there are 7 sins that occurred that expelled God from his garden. When he says, this is my garden, mine is possessive. That means God was here. So when God created the world, he was here in a much more revealed form. Then you have the first sin, and that kind of pushed God up. And the next sin, and each sin kind of pushed God away from his garden. That's what the other maamer is about. But then when you look at the forefathers, starting from Abraham, you start from Abraham, each of them subsequently brought God closer down to this world till you get to Moshe, who actually brought God into the world with the giving of the Torah. He brought God back down into the world. You see, there was a great revelation that occurred then. So that's Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Levi, the tribe of Levi, right? He's one of the 12 tribes. Levi had a son named Kahas. He had a son named Amram, and his son was Moshe. We have the full lineage. The Torah is very specific, especially, if you look at some of the beginning of Bereshis, in between all the stories, it goes through like, he begat him, he lived X amount of years, and he begat him, everybody begat. There's a bunch of begatting. It's not just like, oh, that it's just like listing it, but we have a full chronological account from day one of creation. As far as the Torah is concerned, we can actually count going back to the beginning. So all the begats, even though some of these people, we don't have the stories about them, but we know exactly how long they lived, we have an exact timeline. From Adam all the way to where we are now. It's just showing now all the ways that 7 is considered a special number, which we know why we're doing this. It's the 7th day of Pesach. It's written that Moshe ascended to God. Moshe went up on the mountain. So far we had in the sky, 7 is precious. In the land, 7 is precious. In the generations, 7 is precious. In the forefathers, 7 is precious. In sons, 7 is precious. The 7th is beloved. As it is stated, David was the 7th. He was the youngest of 7 boys. In kings, this number 7 is all over the place. We spent so much time talking about, hey, now 7 is going to have a turn. In kings, the 7th is beloved. So Shaul, King Saul, Ishbosheth, he was like half king. David, Shlomo, Rechavam, Avia, and Asa. And it's written, and Asa called out to the Lord, extolling Asa in this regard. In years, the 7th is beloved. Why? As it's stated, but in the 7th year shall let it rest and life fallow. As in the Shemitah year, the sabbatical year. In sabbatical years, first in years, we get to this one sabbatical year, that's 7 years, but in all the sabbatical years, the 7th is beloved, as it's stated, and he shall sanctify the 50th year, that's the Yovel year. In days, the 7th is beloved, as stated, and God bless the 7th day. In month, the 7th is beloved, as stated in the 7th month on the first day. The 7th month, the first day is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is in the 7th month. All these things is just bringing out that we see that this idea of Kol Shvim Chavivim, that all the 7th, there's something special, beloved about the 7th. 7th day of Pesach is when this great miracle occurs. Next time, we will wrap everything up.